And with me right now is your Financial Services Director, Betty Parker. And Betty, we are right in the middle of budget season. That's what you're going to be talking about today.
Good morning, Ken.
Good morning.
Hope you had a great 4th.
I did. Hope you did too.
And we are right in the heat of things for budget, so it's good timing with the weather to heat up.
Yeah.
We've actually been at this for several months, as you mentioned. We started back in March with staff preparing budgets, reviewing with committees and boards at hours and hours of meetings. The board members have spent so much time working on these budgets already and preparing for the eventual release to the community, so they'll know what their proposed assessments are for next year.
All right. And what I was going to ask, did it start earlier than normal this year, or am I wrong about that?
No, we call it March Madness.
Okay, all right.
We kick off our internal staff budget preparations in March, and the committee meetings really are heavy in May. And we go through line items, talk about operating and reserves with a special focus on service levels and programs, what the boards want to do.
Okay, very good. So let's get to the first slide, and the first one is really the budget calendar.
Right. So we have some meetings next week. It's a busy week. We've got a presentation from the CEO on Monday at 1:30 p.m. in the boardroom. These are not televised meetings, so we encourage resident participation to come on in and join us. And the CEO will be presenting the proposed budget in its entirety, and then we'll break off into these corporate specific meetings, starting with GRF on Wednesday, United on Thursday, and Third Mutual on Friday. And that's when they're going to look at the entire business plan, not just the programs and service levels, but also the reserve contributions and where they're at with the bottom line. Okay.
All right. And of course, as we get to August, those are the ones that are televised.
Yes. So we'll turn around another version of the budget, make any changes that are requested next week, and present that to the community at these televised meetings in August on the 8th, 9th, and 10th.
All right. And then in September, at the regular board meetings, that is really when they are revised, or they're revised a little bit between August and September, tweaked sometimes, but that in September is the final resolution, and by then it's like this is it.
Then the budget's approved, right?
Yes.
So we get approval at the regular board meetings in September.
Yes.
The budget by then is just watered down to a resolution.
Yeah.
And we're not in the details of the numbers, but those resolutions will be put in the corporate record, and then we'll prepare all the materials that go out to residents, so they know what their new assessment amount will be.
All right, very good. And speaking of assessment, we're going to look at the next slide here, average basic assessment, that shows this. And there's a pie chart. So if you would, you can talk about that.
This is a little pie chart just to give you a visual representation of the average assessment. Obviously, it varies by unit and is specific to where you live, but the average community-wide is $600 a month.
Okay.
And so this chart, we just wanted to show you that most of the assessment is going into reserve contributions, maintenance, and landscape programs, and utilities. Because the anyone who lives in an HOA, I live in an HOA, you have 2 questions each year, right? You want to know, what is my assessment going to be? What am I paying for? And so this just helps visually remind everyone that there is a big focus on the maintenance programs, the landscape services, and security, recreation. They're all getting their share of the pie, so that we can meet those expected service levels.
All right. And then you have a 10-year staffing budget, right?
Right.
And full-time equivalents. So tell us about this.
The largest piece of the budget in a service organization is wages.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of in-house staff for the programs here. We don't outsource. The only things we outsource are the bigger programs like roof replacements and asphalt work.
Right.
And so we have what we call full-time equivalents. Even though we have a lot of part-time workers, we water it down to a number that's equal to a full-time equivalent, or one person over the course of the year full-time.
Okay, so that means if you have 2 part-timers, you're looking at that as one full-time.
One full-time
as far
equivalent.
as these purposes go.
Right. Okay. And so you can see over 10 years, the boards have made a concerted effort to control staffing levels to help keep those costs down. but we also have to provide the services that are needed in the community. And so 10 years ago, we were at 764 full-time equivalents. We're below that level now at 741, and that's even with adding a lot of expanded services like the call center and so forth. So doing a good job of controlling those staffing levels, and that's one of the biggest contributors to the budget.
All right, and then you have in this last one here, well, you have one more after this, 30% improvement in fund balances.
Right, so on this slide, I wanted to show what the combined fund balances look like for Laguna Woods Village.
Okay.
Now, obviously, each corporation has their own business plan and their own reserve balances, but I combined them here just so that you could see an overall community view of where we've gone in the last 10 years, from 55 million to 72 million. Now, the goal isn't to set aside a bunch of money and just have it sitting in reserves. Obviously, this money is actively purposed for upcoming major repair replacement of the components that the mutuals and GF are responsible for. And so you want to make sure that your assessment is balanced between operating and reserves, that you're looking at the bottom line, having responsible cost controls, but also we want to pay attention to these reserves and make sure that we are setting aside money for the future needs and not having to come upon some big unexpected expenses, and that's a means of controlling those assessments.
So these reserves, just to clarify, you kind of know down the line what they're more than likely going to go for. Is that what you're saying? Versus maybe something comes up totally unexpected.
Well, a good example is a roof.
Okay.
Let's say a roof has a 16-year life. You don't want to wait till year 15 to figure out how much that roof is going to cost and if you have enough money for it, right? So if you're very disciplined, you would put aside 1/16 of the cost of that roof each year into a savings account, what we call a reserve account, and have that money available so that not only is the money available, but everybody who has lived under that roof for 16 years has contributed a share of the cost of replacement. And it's not just the unlucky person who owns a unit at year 16 that has to pay for the full cost of that component. So that's the purpose of reserves, is to look ahead, to plan, and to spread the cost over the life of an asset.
Okay, let me ask you another term that sometimes is brought up, contingency funds. How does that relate in, I guess I should say, how does that compare to reserve fund? Is contingency, is that a fund you put stuff aside for unknown?
So a lot of HOAs will have their operating budget, and at the bottom they'll add a line that says contingency. So they'll just have an operating budgetary line item for contingencies or miscellaneous, and we don't do that here because of the size of Laguna Woods Village. We actually set aside funds into a contingency fund and not in the operating budget. And so if something comes up during the year that is unexpected, that would have normally been paid for out of operations, so let's say Edison raises the rates on electricity much more than we expected, or it's a really hot year and we're using electricity more than anticipated, and we go over budget in operations, we can pull money out of that contingency fund. There's no restrictions on a contingency fund. It's not required by civil code, but it's good financial planning here for Laguna Woods Village due to the size of the operation.
All right. And finally, you sent us a slide, Consumer Price Index, and kind of explain this. I know people hear about this all the time, especially if, like a lot of people in this community, they are on Social Security, so they kind of pay attention to that CPI.
Right. We're preparing budgets for a community that is, most of which is on a fixed income, and so they're very concerned about how these assessments relate to the cost of living and how costs are rising. So I just wanted to point out that last year we were enjoying some low inflationary numbers, hovering between 2 and 2.5% while we prepared the budgets last year. And as you can see on this chart, CPI has been growing since summer of last year, and we're already up at 4%. So it's just something we have to keep in mind, acknowledging that materials cost more money, labor costs are driven up and by the market forces. And sometimes that's these items are out of our control, so we have to keep that in mind when we're preparing the budgets.
All right, very good. We really appreciate the update and giving us the schedule. And as Betty pointed out, in August is when we televise those budget meetings for United, Third, and of course GRF. If you live over in the towers, they have their own budget meeting over there. So that will televise, but beforehand there's still a lot of work to be done. And now these are the ones in July that are coming up that you have listed here, July 9th and all. Those are open meetings but not televised, am I correct?
Right. All the budget meetings are open, very transparent, and we encourage resident participation. If you want to know why something's being done or why it's not being done, why you're having to pay, so much in your assessment, come on in and get educated.
All right, very good. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
You take care, and we'll be right back.